What is the ultimate betrayal? Is it a lie? Is it infidelity? Or is it something so dark, so twisted it crawls from the buried past to shatter the present? For Amelia Hayes, a 34-year-old architect just hours away from becoming a mother, betrayal was supposed to be a distant concept. But as she gasped through contractions in a sterile Boston hospital room, her husband Marcus wasn't by her side. He was on a sun-drenched beach in Bali, celebrating a new beginning with his mistress. Amelia thought his infidelity was the deepest cut. She was wrong. The real secret wasn't on his phone. It was in her baby's blood. The fluorescent lights of the maternity ward at Massachusetts General Hospital hummed a monotonous, indifferent tune. It was a sound Amelia Hayes knew she would hate for the rest of her life. Each flicker of the long tube bulbs seemed to mock the frantic, primal rhythm of her own body. The contractions were tidal waves now cresting with blinding pain before receding just enough to let her gasp for air. Her knuckles were white as she gripped the bed rail. "Just breathe, Ames. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Like we practiced," a calm voice said beside her. It was Chloe Jenkins, her best friend, her maid of honor, and now her unwilling stand-in for a birthing partner. Chloe's fiery red hair was pulled back in a messy bun, her normally vibrant face etched with concern. She dabbed a cool cloth on Amelia's forehead. "Where is he, Chloe?" Amelia panted the words, catching in her throat between spasms. "He should be here." "I know, sweetie. I know." Chloe's eyes darted to the silent phone on the bedside table. They had tried calling Marcus Thorne, Amelia's husband, a dozen times. Each call went straight to an international voicemail service. The last text he'd sent 12 hours ago was infuriatingly cheerful. "Landing in Singapore soon for the final leg. This merger is a beast. Kiss the bump for me. I'll be on the first flight back the second it's done. Love you." A beast of a merger. That's what Marcus, a golden boy venture capitalist, had called this last-minute, absolutely can't-miss trip to Asia. He'd been so apologetic, his handsome face a mask of regret. "It's the final piece of the Atherton deal, Ames. It means we can buy the house in Beacon Hill. It means this baby will have everything." He had kissed her swollen belly, then her lips promising to be back long before her due date. But the baby had other plans. Her water had broken 3 weeks early. Another contraction ripped through her, a guttural cry escaping her lips. "I can't do this without him," she sobbed, the pain mingling with a profound, aching loneliness. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. They had a plan. A meticulously curated, beautifully designed plan, much like the blueprints Amelia drew for a living. Marcus would hold her hand. He'd cut the cord. He'd be the first to hold their son. "Yes, you can, Amelia," Chloe said, her voice firm. "You are the strongest person I know. Marcus or no Marcus, you are having this baby. You are doing this." For the next 6 hours, Amelia drifted on an ocean of pain. The world shrank to the 4 walls of the delivery room, the encouraging words of the nurses, and Chloe's steadfast presence. She pushed with a strength she didn't know she possessed, fueled by a primal need to meet the tiny person she'd carried for nearly 9 months. At 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, Oliver Hayes Thorne was born, screaming his way into the world. He was small, covered in vernix, but perfect. The nurse laid him on Amelia's chest, and in that instant the world stopped humming. The pain vanished. The anger at Marcus melted away, replaced by an overwhelming, all-consuming love that left her breathless. "He's beautiful, Ames," Chloe whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Absolutely perfect." Amelia stroked his downy hair, her own tears mingling with Chloe's. She looked at her son's tiny, wrinkled face and saw Marcus in the curve of his brow, her own father in the shape of his nose. He was theirs. She just wished Marcus was there to see it. Chloe took the first photos, sending them to Marcus's silent phone, along with a simple message: Oliver Hayes Thorne. 7. Albs 2 O's. Amelia and baby are healthy. Call us. Exhausted but wired. Amelia couldn't sleep. She just watched Oliver, his little chest rising and falling. Chloe had finally dozed off in the uncomfortable armchair in the corner. The quiet of the early morning felt sacred. Amelia picked up her own phone, intending to scroll through photos of her pregnancy to reminisce. She opened Instagram out of habit, and that's when her world, so recently expanded, with joy imploded. It wasn't a post from any of her friends. It was on the Explore page, an algorithm's cruel trick, a photo from a popular travel blogger she didn't even follow. The location tag read, Mulia Resort, Nusa Dua Bali. The picture was stunning. A white sand beach, a turquoise ocean, 2 champagne flutes held up against the sunset. And holding one of those flutes was her husband, Marcus. He was smiling that dazzling, confident smile that had first made her fall in love. His arm was wrapped tightly around a woman with long, flowing, dark hair. The woman was laughing, her head thrown back in carefree ecstasy. Amelia knew her instantly. Isabella Rossi, a freelance graphic designer his firm sometimes worked with. A woman Amelia had met a handful of times. A woman Marcus had always referred to as a talented kid. But it was the caption that delivered the final fatal blow, written by the woman Isabella, her profile public for the world to see. Celebrating new beginnings with the one who showed me what love really is. To our future, my love. #Honeymoon for 2. Bali bliss. Soulmate honeymoon. The word hung in the airless hospital room, a toxic vapor. A honeymoon, while she was in labor. The phone slipped from Amelia's numb fingers, clattering to the floor and jolting Chloe awake. "Ames, what is it? What's wrong?" Amelia couldn't speak. She could only point a trembling finger at the phone on the floor. Chloe picked it up, her eyes scanning the screen. The color drained from her face. Her expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, then to pure, unadulterated rage. "That son of a bitch," Chloe breathed the words low and dangerous. "That absolute monster." Amelia looked from the glowing screen to the sleeping baby on her chest. Oliver. Her son. The product of her love with a man who was celebrating a new life with someone else while she was bringing theirs into the world. The betrayal was so immense, so cinematic in its cruelty, it felt unreal. Her heart didn't just break, it atomized. In that moment, staring at the proof of her husband's monstrous deception, Amelia Hayes made a silent vow to the tiny, innocent life in her arms. She didn't know how, but she would protect him from this. She had to. She had no idea then that the man on the beach wasn't the only secret she'd have to protect her son from. The real danger was already there, hidden in Oliver's very DNA. The first few weeks were a blur of postpartum hormones, sleepless nights, and a grief so profound it felt like a physical weight on Amelia's chest. The beautiful nursery they had designed together felt like a mausoleum. Every tiny pair of sneakers, every lovingly chosen book was a testament to a future that had been a lie. Marcus had, of course, eventually called. His voice, when it finally crackled through the phone speaker 2 days later, was a frantic symphony of poorly constructed lies. Ames. Oh my God. I just got the messages. My phone died. The reception in the remote conference center was non-existent. A son. I have a son. Amelia, cradling a fussy Oliver, felt nothing. The man on the phone was a stranger. Don't, she said, her voice flat and cold. Don't you dare, Marcus. What are you talking about? I'm booking a flight right now. I'll be home in 30 hours. I saw the picture, Marcus. She cut him off. Bali, Isabella Rossi, your honeymoon. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. She could almost hear the gears turning in his head, calculating, recalibrating his deception. Amelia, that's not what it looks like, he finally stammered. It's a misunderstanding. Isabella, her father is a potential investor. It was a business dinner, a celebration for the deal. She's just dramatic, you know how these artistic types are. Honeymoon is just a silly inside joke. It was the weakness of the lie, the sheer insulting transparency of it, that solidified her resolve. He didn't even respect her enough to craft a believable fiction. I have a son to take care of, Amelia said, her voice devoid of emotion. My lawyer will be in touch with yours. She hung up before he could respond, her hand shaking, not with sadness, but with a cold, clear rage. Life settled into a new, painful rhythm. Chloe was a rock her parents flew in from Chicago to help, and Amelia focused every ounce of her being on Oliver. He was a quiet baby, but beautiful. He had her blue eyes and Marcus's dark, curly hair. Yet as the weeks turned into a month, then 2, a small, nagging worry began to grow in the back of Amelia's mind. Oliver wasn't hitting the typical milestones. He was lethargic. His muscle tone seemed weak, and he had trouble feeding. He was constantly fussy, a low-grade whimper that signaled a discomfort he couldn't articulate. Her pediatrician initially brushed it off. Babies develop at their own pace, she'd said kindly. But at his 3-month checkup, even the doctor couldn't ignore the signs. Oliver had gained very little weight, and his liver felt slightly enlarged upon examination. A cloud of concern passed over the doctor's face. I want to run some blood panels, she said, her tone suddenly serious. Just to be thorough. The week that followed was the longest of Amelia's life. The joy of new motherhood was completely eclipsed by a gnawing, terrifying fear. Finally, the call came. The pediatrician asked her to come in and to bring someone with her. Amelia knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that it was bad news. Chloe came with her, holding her hand in the sterile-smelling waiting room. Dr. Anya Sharma, a pediatric geneticist with kind eyes and a somber demeanor, sat across from them in a small, windowless office. She laid out a series of charts and papers. Amelia, she began gently. Oliver's blood work showed some significant anomalies. We ran a full genetic sequencing panel to be sure. Your son has been diagnosed with a rare genetic condition. It's a type of lysosomal storage disorder, specifically a mutation we refer to as glycogen storage disease, type 11. Amelia stared at her. The words were a jumble of medical jargon. What does that mean? It means his body lacks a specific enzyme needed to break down complex molecules, Dr. Sharma explained patiently. These molecules build up in his cells, particularly in the liver muscles and heart. It's what's causing his poor muscle tone, the enlarged liver, and his difficulty feeding. Is there a cure? Chloe asked, ever the practical one. Dr. Sharma shook her head slowly. There is no cure at present, but there are treatments. Enzyme replacement therapy, dietary management. It can manage the symptoms and improve his quality of life significantly. It's a serious chronic condition, Amelia. It will require lifelong care. Amelia felt the floor drop out from under her. Her perfect baby. Her sweet Oliver. He was sick, and it was permanent. Tears streamed down her face, silent and hot. "How?" she whispered. "How did this happen?" Dr. Sharma's expression softened with sympathy. "This is an autosomal recessive disorder," she said, pointing to a diagram of gene pairs. "That means for a child to have it, they must inherit one copy of the mutated gene from their mother and one copy from their father. Both parents must be carriers of the recessive gene." A carrier. The word echoed in Amelia's mind. She and Marcus. They had done this to him. This perfect storm of unlucky genetics. "We need to test you and his father," Dr. Sharma continued. "It's important for future family planning and for understanding the specific mutation Oliver has." "I'll do it right now," Amelia said immediately. A nurse drew her blood. Getting Marcus's sample would be a legal matter, but a necessary one. A week later, Amelia was back in Dr. Sharma's office. This time, she was alone. "Well, we have your results," Dr. Sharma said, looking at a file. She paused, her brow furrowed in a way that set off alarm bells in Amelia's head. "This is unusual." "What is it?" "Amelia, your genetic test came back completely clear. You are not a carrier for GSD type 11. You do not have the recessive gene." Amelia stared at her, confused. "But you said both parents have to be carriers, so maybe the test was wrong." "These tests are over 99.9% accurate." Dr. Sharma said, her voice steady. "We even ran it twice to be sure. You are not a carrier." The implication hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Dr. Sharma, a professional, wouldn't say it. She didn't have to. If Oliver had the disease, he needed 2 copies of the gene. If Amelia didn't have one to give, then... "So what you're saying," Amelia said slowly, the world tilting on its axis, "is that if I'm not a carrier, it's medically impossible for Oliver to have this disease, if Marcus is his father." Dr. Sharma held her gaze, her expression one of deep compassion. "From a genetic standpoint," she said carefully, "for Oliver to have an autosomal recessive condition, he must have inherited a faulty gene from both of his biological parents." Amelia's mind reeled. It was an accusation delivered in the sterile language of science. The doctor was telling her that Marcus couldn't be the father. But that was impossible. She had never been with anyone else. Not once. She had been completely, foolishly faithful to the man who was vacationing with his mistress in Bali. She was trapped in a logical nightmare. Oliver was sick. The sickness required 2 carrier parents. She was not a carrier. Therefore, Marcus must be a carrier, and the biological father must be some other carrier. But Marcus was the biological father. She knew it with every fiber of her being. So what was the truth? Was her knowledge of her own life a lie? Or was there another secret, something buried even deeper than infidelity, hiding in the double helix of her husband's DNA? The question sent a shiver of pure dread down her spine. The betrayal in Bali was a simple, ugly story. This was a medical impossibility, a secret that science itself was trying to tell her. The doctor's words became a maddening loop in Amelia's mind. Impossible. Medically impossible. For days, she existed in a fog, caring for Oliver on autopilot, her thoughts churning. She felt like she was losing her grip on reality. Could a person be so traumatized they created false memories? Had there been a night, a moment she had completely blocked out? The very idea felt like a violation of her own soul. No, it wasn't possible. The foundation of her world might be shattered, but she knew her own history. Marcus was Oliver's father. This left only one other possibility. However remote, the science was wrong in a way they didn't understand. Or more accurately, they were missing a piece of the puzzle. She confided in Chloe one evening over a bottle of wine after Oliver was finally asleep. She laid out the entire medical paradox. "So the doctor is basically telling you that you cheated," Chloe said, her voice laced with fury on Amelia's behalf, "while you were married to that cheating scumbag. The irony would be hilarious if it wasn't so horrific." "I didn't, Chloe. You know I didn't." "Of course you didn't," Chloe said, immediately reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. "Which means there's something else going on. Something about Marcus." Marcus. Everything always came back to Marcus. After their one explosive phone call, all communication had gone through lawyers. He was fighting her on everything: the divorce settlement, alimony, even demanding partial custody of a son he hadn't met, all while his Instagram-famous honeymoon continued. His lawyers were painting Amelia as unstable and vindictive. They sent a request for a court-ordered paternity test, a move designed to humiliate her. Amelia's lawyer told her to accept. "Let him prove it himself," she'd advised. "It will only strengthen our case that he's the father and abandoned you." The test was arranged. A sample was collected from Oliver and Marcus, now back in the States and living in a sleek downtown apartment, submitted his own. The waiting period was agonizing. Amelia found herself praying for the result she knew to be true, the result that would only deepen the medical mystery. The letter from the lab arrived on a crisp autumn morning. With trembling hands, she tore it open. Probability of paternity 99.999%. Marcus Thorne was without a shadow of a scientific doubt Oliver's father. Relief washed over her, followed immediately by utter bewilderment. She called Dr. Sharma's office and relayed the information. The geneticist was silent for a moment. "That complicates things, Amelia," she finally said. "It presents a genetic contradiction I have not encountered in my career. There is one highly improbable theory, but it's pure speculation without more information." "What is it?" Amelia pressed. "It's a concept called uniparental disomy, where a child inherits 2 copies of a chromosome from one parent and none from the other. It's incredibly rare. The only other explanation is that there's a novel mutation, something specific to your husband's family line that we don't have on record." Marcus's family. A family as opaque and distant as Marcus himself had become. His mother, Eleanor, had died when he was a teenager. A boating accident, he'd said. His father, Richard Thorne, was a formidable old-money patriarch, a man who moved in circles of power and privilege, far removed from Amelia's world. He had remarried years ago and had a tense, formal relationship with his only son. Richard had never approved of Amelia, seeing her as beneath their station. "I need to look into his family," Amelia said to Chloe that night, a new determination in her voice. "There's a secret there. There has to be." Chloe, ever the pragmatist, cracked her knuckles. "Okay, let's do this. Richard Thorne. What do we know?" The digging began. They started with the obvious public records business. Filings, society pages from the Boston Globe archives. Richard Thorne was the CEO of Thorne Investments, a company built on old steel money and now a powerhouse in real estate and private equity. He was ruthless, successful, and intensely private. Amelia's architect mind, trained to see patterns and structures, started to piece together a timeline. She pulled out the old photo albums from her and Marcus's courtship. There were so few pictures of his mother. When Amelia had asked, Marcus had been evasive. My father got rid of most of her things after she died. It was too painful. She found one faded photograph of a young Marcus with his parents. Richard stiff and imposing. Elena, his mother, was stunningly beautiful. She had dark hair, almost black, and striking, slightly tilted eyes. She looked vibrant, full of life. It was hard to imagine her gone. Then Chloe found the first real crack. While scouring old business articles from the early 90s, she uncovered a story about a major real estate deal Richard Thorne had orchestrated the acquisition of a waterfront property in the North End. The article mentioned his primary rival in the deal, a man named Lorenzo Rossi, head of a successful Italian import-export business. The deal had been famously hostile, with Rossi accusing Thorne of unethical tactics. Rossi. The name jolted Amelia. Isabella's last name. It's got to be a coincidence, right? Amelia said, her heart starting to beat faster. Boston has a large Italian-American community. Maybe, Chloe said, her fingers flying across her keyboard. Let's find out. It didn't take long. They found Isabella Rossi's professional design portfolio online. In her bio, she mentioned her father, Lorenzo Rossi, as her inspiration. The connection was real. Marcus's father and his mistress's father were old business enemies. Was that it? Was the affair some kind of twisted, multi-generational revenge plot? It felt dramatic, but thin. The real breakthrough came from a place Amelia least expected it. She was looking at Isabella's public Facebook profile, scrolling back years, looking for any connection to Marcus that predated their official work relationship. She went back through years of party photos and design projects. And then she found it. A family album from 2015 titled La Famiglia. There were photos of Isabella with her father Lorenzo. There were photos of her with brothers and cousins. And there was a photo of her with her mother, a graceful, elegant woman named Sophia Rossi. Amelia froze, zooming in on the picture. Sophia Rossi. She had the same dark hair as her daughter, the same elegant bone structure, but it was her eyes, striking, slightly tilted eyes. They were hauntingly familiar. Amelia's blood ran cold. She scrambled for her own photo album for the one faded picture of Marcus's mother. She placed her phone screen next to the old photograph. Sophia Rossi and Elena Thorne were not just similar. Allowing for the 20-year age difference between the photos, they could have been sisters. The resemblance was uncanny, undeniable. What did it mean? How could Marcus's dead mother look exactly like his mistress's living one? It was another impossibility, another contradiction that made Amelia's head spin. She felt like she was standing at the edge of a chasm, and the ground was crumbling beneath her feet. The secret wasn't just about a gene. It was about a face that had been in two places at once. The image of the two women became an obsession, an unsolvable Rubik's Cube in Amelia's mind. It was more than a resemblance. It was a replication. She and Chloe spent an entire evening with the images projected onto her living room wall, the faded photograph of Elena Thorne beside the crisp digital image of Sophia Rossi. They sat on the floor like detectives in a cold case, surrounded by takeout containers and a shared sense of creeping dread. "Look at the epicanthic fold," Amelia murmured, tracing the unique shape of the women's eyes with a laser pointer. As an architect, she had a mind for spatial relationships, for the precise angles and curves that create a structure. She was now applying that same forensic analysis to a human face. It's identical. And the philtrum, the groove above the lip, has the exact same depth and curve. Those are like fingerprints. They don't just happen. Okay, so they're not just similar. They're twins, Chloe reasoned, trying to fit the anomaly into a logical box. Separated at birth, one marries a tycoon, the other marries his rival. It's the plot of a 1980s miniseries, but it's possible. But it doesn't feel right, Amelia countered, shaking her head. Why would Richard Thorne, a man obsessed with image and control, allow such a coincidence to exist so close to him? Why would Marcus's mother have an identical twin sister married to his father's sworn enemy? And no one ever mentioned it. The mystery deepened as they delved into the official records. Elena Thorne's past was a fortress. Born Elena Petridis in Greece, she came to the US for university, married Richard, and then ceased to exist in May 1995. Her records were impeccably clean, sealed by a death certificate that cited accidental drowning. There were no loose threads, no questionable details. It was too perfect, as if scrubbed clean by an expert hand. Sophia Rossi, however, was another story. Her life began, at least on paper, where Elena's ended. Chloe's legal database access unearthed a treasure trove of information. Sophia Petridis, sharing the same maiden name as Elena, had applied for a new social security number in late 1995, citing lost documents in a house fire. She married Lorenzo Rossi in June of 1996, and sandwiched between those two events was the birth of her daughter Isabella in March 1996. Look at this timeline, Ames Chloe said, pointing to the screen. Elena dies in May 95. Sophia gets a new identity a few months later. Isabella is born 10 months after Elena's death. Sophia marries Lorenzo 3 months after that. It's impossibly tight. It's the timeline of someone starting a new life in a hurry. The puzzle was maddening, full of pieces that hinted at a larger, more sinister picture. But it was all circumstantial, ghostly evidence. Amelia knew she needed something concrete, something that couldn't be explained away as coincidence. Driven by a cold, desperate intuition, she made a pivotal decision. She took a significant portion of her dwindling savings and hired a forensic accountant, a discreet professional with a reputation for unearthing secrets the wealthy paid millions to hide. While she waited for his report, the official custody battle with Marcus began. His lawyers were ruthless, painting her as an emotionally unstable, grieving woman lashing out. They filed motion after motion, burying her in paperwork. It was a war of attrition, designed to wear her down. But every time she felt her resolve weaken, she would look at Oliver at the daily struggle written on his small features, and her determination would harden like steel. The accountant's report arrived via encrypted email 2 weeks later. It was a dry, numbers-driven document, but to Amelia it read like a confession written in blood. The report detailed a complex web of offshore accounts and blind trusts. The centerpiece was the Thorne Legacy Trust, established 15 years prior. The accountant had traced the funding of this trust directly to Marcus's personal investment accounts. Every quarter, a significant percentage of his earnings was funneled into this trust, and the sole unchangeable beneficiary was not his future children, not a charity, but his father, Richard Thorne. "It makes no sense," Chloe said, reading over Amelia's shoulder. "It's reverse inheritance. The son is paying the tycoon father millions of dollars over 15 years. Why? It's not a gift," Amelia said, a chilling certainty dawning on her. "It's a leash. It's the price of a secret so big that Richard made his own son pay to maintain it without even telling him what it was." This was it, the concrete proof. the undeniable evidence of a long-term, high-stakes conspiracy. Armed with it, Amelia knew she could no longer fight this war through lawyers and motions. She had to face the monster in his lair. She picked up the phone and called the main line of Thorn Investments, her voice a paradigm of calm she did not feel. "I'd like to schedule a meeting with Mr. Richard Thorn," she said. "Tell him it's regarding his grandson." The offices of Thorn Investments were designed to intimidate. Located on the top floor of a skyscraper overlooking the Boston Harbor, the space was a symphony of dark mahogany, polished brass, and cold marble. The silence was heavy, broken only by the whisper of expensive shoes on priceless rugs. Richard Thorn sat behind a desk the size of a small car, a portrait of absolute power. He did not rise when she entered. "Mr. Hayes," he began the name a deliberate insult. "I've allotted you 10 minutes. I trust you'll be brief." Amelia walked to his desk and sat uninvited in the leather chair opposite him. She placed a file on the gleaming wood between them. "My son, your grandson has a severe genetic disorder, Richard." He waved a dismissive hand. "A tragedy, yes," Marcus informed me. "Rest assured the child will want for nothing. The best care is a given. His care isn't the issue. His genetics are," she said, her gaze locked on his. She explained the science of autosomal recessive inheritance, her voice steady and clinical. "Both parents must be carriers. I am not a carrier. Yet a legally binding paternity test has proven that Marcus is without question Oliver's father." She watched him carefully. A lesser man might have shown confusion. Richard Thorn merely steepened his fingers, his expression one of bored indifference, but a tiny muscle in his jaw twitched a single telltale sign of tension. "I'm sure the doctors have their theories," he said, his voice smooth as glass. "Genetic science is always discovering new anomalies." "They are," Amelia agreed. "And I have one of my own." She slid the accountant's summary across the desk. "Marcus has been paying you millions of dollars for 15 years. Why? What secret is worth that much? That much, Richard. A secret you keep even from him." His composure finally began to fray, his eyes cold and grey as the Boston Sea narrowed. "You are wading into matters that are of no concern to you. This is a private family financial arrangement. It stopped being private when it started affecting my son's health," she retorted, her voice gaining an edge. Now was the moment. She took her phone from her purse, called up the side-by-side images of Elena and Sophia, and placed it firmly on the desk in front of him. "I think this is the secret you've been protecting. Or should I say, her." The effect was instantaneous and profound. Richard Thorn looked at the screen, and for a split second, the mask of the ruthless patriarch fell away. In his eyes, Amelia saw a flicker of something ancient, a memory, a loss, a ghost. It was immediately replaced by sheer, undiluted panic. His face turned a deep, mottled red. "What is this?" he hissed, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "It's your late wife, Elena," Amelia said. "And it's also Isabella Rossi's mother, Sophia. The resemblance is impossible, isn't it? Unless it's not a resemblance at all." He stared at her, his mind clearly racing, searching for an escape route where there was none. He saw the full scope of her knowledge in her unblinking eyes. He was cornered, and like any cornered animal, he lashed out. With a roar of pure rage, he shot to his feet and swept his arm across the desk, sending her phone, the files, and a crystal glass of water crashing to the floor. "Get out!" he bellowed, his voice echoing through the cavernous office. "Get out of here now! You have no idea what you're meddling in. I have spent a lifetime protecting my son." From this security guards appeared at the door, but Amelia was already on her feet, her heart hammering not with fear, but with the electrifying certainty of the truth. He hadn't denied it. He hadn't called her crazy. He had confirmed everything with his rage. He had talked about protecting Marcus as she walked out of that opulent office, leaving the powerful Richard Thorne sputtering in a mess of his own making, she knew. Back in her own living room, Chloe listened pale and rapt as Amelia recounted the meeting. "He didn't say I was wrong, Chloe," Amelia said, pacing the floor, her mind on fire. "He told me I was meddling. He wasn't protecting a memory. He was protecting a living, breathing secret." The pieces which had been scattered and confusing now flew together with magnetic force, forming a single horrifying image. "The boating accident," Amelia whispered, stopping dead in her tracks. No body was ever found. What if it wasn't an accident? What if it was an exit strategy? She laid it all out for Chloe, the theory forming on her lips as she spoke it. Elena, trapped in her marriage, had an affair with Lorenzo Rossi. She became pregnant. For a man like Richard Thorne, the public humiliation would be worse than death. So he orchestrated one. He erased Elena Thorne from existence and created Sophia Rossi, giving her to his rival. It was the ultimate act of psychological warfare, a way to control them both forever with their shared secret. And he left his own son Marcus to grieve for a mother who was very much alive. The final piece clicked into place with a sickening thud. Isabella Amelia breathed, her blood running cold. "She's Elena's daughter. That makes her Marcus's half-sister." The room spun. The affair in Bali, the honeymoon, the carefree pictures, it was all cast in a hideous new light. And Oliver, her beautiful, innocent son. His illness wasn't a freak of nature or a medical paradox. It was the logical, biological consequence of a union between a brother and sister who shared a mother, and a mother who carried a cursed gene. Oliver's diagnosis was the family's darkest secret, written in his very blood. The truth, once she possessed it, was a living entity in Amelia's home. It coiled in the corners of the nursery, its shadow falling across Oliver's crib. It hissed in the quiet moments between his pained whimpers and the hum of the feeding pump that had become a permanent fixture in their lives. For 3 days, Amelia lived with this toxic guest, paralyzed by its terrible weight. Every option felt like a betrayal. To stay silent was to dishonor the truth of her son's existence, to potentially compromise his long-term medical care, which depended on a complete genetic picture. To speak it aloud felt like detonating a bomb in the center of her own child's life, branding him forever with a story of tragedy and taboo. She found herself watching Marcus's life from afar, a ghost haunting the edges of his social media. He was back in Boston, photographed at galas, his smile as bright and empty as ever. He was a man performing a life utterly oblivious to the fact that his very identity was a carefully constructed fiction. A part of her, a dark and wounded part, wanted to see that smile shatter. But then she would look at Oliver. Her son was her entire world, a fragile planet she desperately tried to keep spinning. One afternoon, while struggling to get him to take a new medication, he looked at her, his blue eyes cloudy with discomfort, and let out a soft, sighing cry. It wasn't a cry of anger, but of exhaustion. It was the sound of a tiny body fighting a war it didn't understand. In that moment, the debate in Amelia's soul ended. This was not about revenge. It was not about punishing Marcus or destroying Richard Thorne. It was about Oliver. He deserved a life free of secrets that could harm him. He deserved every possible medical advantage, and the truth, no matter how monstrous, was now a medical necessity. Her fury, which had been a wild, chaotic fire, now cooled and hardened into something else, a tool, sharp, precise, and purposeful. She called Chloe. "He's coming tomorrow with his lawyer to talk about custody," Amelia said, her voice devoid of any tremor. "I need you here." The next afternoon, the house was still. Amelia had prepared the living room as if it were a stage. On the coffee table, a single thick file folder sat stark against the dark wood. Chloe was in the armchair in the corner, a silent sentinel, her presence a source of immense strength. When the doorbell rang, Amelia's heart gave a single hard thud, and then settled into a preternatural calm. Marcus strode in, bringing the scent of expensive cologne and the brisk air of the outside world with him. He was dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, looking every bit the magnate, a man accustomed to getting his way. Behind him was his lawyer, a silver-haired man named Peterson, whose face was set in a firm, no-nonsense expression. They saw this as a simple negotiation, a matter of assets and visitation schedules. "Amelia," Marcus began, his tone condescendingly gentle. "I'm glad we can finally sit down and be civil about this. We need to work out a schedule for Oliver. I want to be a father to him." The sheer audacity of the statement after everything nearly made her laugh. "Sit down, Marcus," she said, gesturing to the sofa opposite her. They sat arranging themselves with an air of professional patience. Peterson opened his briefcase. "My client is prepared to be very generous, Amelia, but he is firm on his request for joint physical custody." "Before we discuss custody," Amelia said, her voice cutting through the lawyer's spiel, "we need to talk about Oliver's health, his real health. And to do that, we have to talk about your family." Marcus let out an impatient sigh. "Amelia, I've already told you my family's resources will be at his disposal. We've been over this. What more is there to say?" "Everything," she repeated softly. She leaned forward and pushed the thick folder across the table toward them. "This is Oliver's complete medical file. I suggest you look at it." Peterson, the lawyer, picked it up. His professional curiosity piqued. Marcus just watched, annoyed. The lawyer began to flip through the pages, his brow furrowing slightly as he read the diagnosis. Glycogen storage disease, type 11. Autosomal recessive. He scanned the dense medical language, the prognosis, the litany of symptoms. "And this," Amelia continued, sliding another document out from her side of the table. "This is my genetic report. As you can see, I am not a carrier for the recessive gene." Peterson's eyes darted from one report to the other. He looked up at Amelia, then at Marcus. "I'm not a doctor, but I understand the basics. If Mrs. Thorne—" "Hayes," Amelia corrected him coldly. "My name is Amelia Hayes." "If Ms. Hayes is not a carrier," the lawyer amended, "then it would be genetically impossible for Mr. Thorne to be the father." He looked at Marcus, a silent question in his eyes. Marcus finally scoffed, a smirk playing on his lips. "Oh, I see where this is going. This is your angle, Ames, to try and claim the baby isn't mine to get more money. We already did the paternity test, remember? It's done. I'm the father." He said it with a flourish, as if laying down a winning card. "Yes, you are." Amelia agreed, her calmness unnerving him. The test confirmed it with 99.999% certainty, which creates a paradox, doesn't it? A medical impossibility. She let the words hang in the air. An impossibility that is, unless there's a factor you haven't considered, a factor that dramatically increases the probability of a rare recessive disease. She looked him dead in the eye. Such as consanguinity. The doctors asked me if there was any chance the father and I were related. A humorless laugh escaped Marcus's lips. "This is insane. You're insane." Amelia ignored him. Her movements were deliberate as she pulled 2 photographs from the file and placed them side by side on the table. One was the faded picture of a young, vibrant Elena Thorne. The other was a crisp, recent printout of Sophia Rossi, Isabella's mother. "Do you know who this is, Marcus?" she asked, pointing to the photo of Sophia. "Of course," he said, irritated. "It's Isabella's mother. I've met her. What's your point? That she has dark hair, like my mother did." "My point," Amelia said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, "is that they are not 2 women who look alike. They are the same woman." Marcus stared at the photos. The lawyer leaned in his professional mask, slipping into one of pure, stunned confusion. For the first time, Marcus was truly looking. He saw the identical curve of the smile, the unique, slightly tilted shape of the eyes, the bone structure that time had not changed. The resemblance was absolute, a ghost staring back at him. "That's not possible," he breathed, shaking his head. "My mother died. She's dead." "Is she?" Amelia pressed her voice relentless. She then laid out the final pieces of her devastating puzzle. The timeline: Elena's death in May 1995. Isabella's birth in March 1996. The marriage of Sophia to Lorenzo Rossi 3 months later. And finally, she produced the summary from the forensic accountant. "For 15 years, you have been paying a significant portion of your income into an offshore trust for your father. Why, Marcus, your father is wealthier than you'll ever be. It wasn't support. It was payment. Hush money for a secret so profound he didn't even trust you with it. He let you pay to bury your own mother alive." Peterson, the lawyer, was now pale, staring at the financial statement. This was beyond a messy divorce. This was a conspiracy of staggering proportions. Amelia leaned forward, her voice the only sound in the suffocating silence. She was going to connect the dots for him to draw the final ugly line. "Your mother, Elena, didn't die. She had an affair with your father's rival, Lorenzo Rossi. She got pregnant. To avoid the scandal, your father faked her death and allowed her to start a new life as Sophia Rossi. The daughter she was pregnant with was Isabella. Your Isabella." She paused, letting the weight of the name sink in. "The rare gene for Oliver's disease." She continued, her voice clinical and precise. "It came from your mother. She was a carrier. She gave 1 copy to you, her first child, and she gave another copy to Isabella, her second child. The reason Oliver is sick, Marcus," she said, delivering the final catastrophic blow, "is because his parents are half-siblings." The world stopped. The sound of the word siblings seemed to suck all the air from the room. Marcus's face, which had been a canvas of confusion and denial, was now utterly blank. The tan he'd acquired in Bali was gone, replaced by a ghostly, waxy pallor. His mouth opened a silent scream, but no sound emerged. He looked at the photos, at the medical reports, at Amelia's pitiless, steady gaze. The architecture of his entire life, of his very being, crumbled to dust in that single moment. His grief for his mother was a lie. His affair was not a passionate transgression, but an unwitting, incestuous reunion. "No," he finally whispered the word, a fragile, cracking thing. "No, no. My father. He wouldn't." His denial was a prayer against a truth that was already consuming him. "Call him," Amelia commanded, her voice like steel. Put him on speaker. With hands that shook so violently he could barely operate his phone, Marcus dialed the number. Chloe watched her face a mask of grim vindication. Peterson, the lawyer, looked like he wanted to crawl out of his own skin. The phone rang once, twice. "Marcus!" Richard Thorne's formidable voice boomed through the speaker, laced with impatience. "I'm in a meeting." Marcus couldn't form a sentence. He was choking on the question. He finally managed to force the words out his voice, the broken plea of a lost child. Is my mother alive?" On the other end of the line, there was a dead, damning silence. It stretched for an eternity. In that quiet, Marcus's last shred of hope died. When Richard Thorne finally spoke, his voice was not for his son. It was a low, venomous growl directed across the city at Amelia herself. "You've done this," he hissed. "You foolish, meddling girl. You've destroyed everything." The line went dead. The click of the phone hanging up was like the sound of a guillotine. It was the only confirmation Marcus needed. He shattered. A sound tore from his throat that was barely human. A howl of such agony and despair that it made Chloe flinch. He collapsed forward, his head in his hands, his body racked with violent, soul-deep sobs. He was weeping not just for his lies, but for the lies that had been his entire life. The aftermath was an avalanche. The scandal was too immense, too shocking to be contained. Peterson, in a desperate act of self-preservation, distanced himself from the Thorne family, and the story bled into the press. It became a media firestorm, a modern-day Greek tragedy played out in the headlines of the Boston Globe and the New York Post. Richard Thorne's empire, built on secrets and steel, became toxic overnight. He was ruined a recluse in his own mansion. Isabella Rossi, along with her mother, Elena, Sophia, vanished, swallowed by the European continent, seeking anonymity from a truth that had made them infamous. Amelia got everything. The divorce was a formality. She had full, uncontested custody of Oliver the Beacon Hill house they were once supposed to buy, and a financial settlement that would secure Oliver's medical future for the rest of his life. But there was no victory lap, no feeling of triumph. There was only the quiet, somber work of putting the pieces of her life back together. Her world became small and sacred. It was the rhythm of Oliver's treatments, the warmth of Chloe's friendship, the peaceful solitude of her home. The noise of the scandal faded into the background. She began to draw again, not for clients, but for herself, designing fantastical, impossible structures that obeyed their own logic. She was rebuilding. One evening, holding a sleeping Oliver against her chest, she looked down at his peaceful face. He was not a secret. He was not a tragedy. He was simply her son. In the ashes of Marcus Thorne's world, Amelia Hayes had been forged anew. She had walked through the darkest betrayal imaginable and emerged not as a victim, but as a creator, a protector, a mother. And in that hard-won peace, she finally found her new beginning. Amelia's story is a harrowing journey into the heart of deception. It shows us that the most devastating secrets are often not the ones whispered between lovers, but the ones buried in families, passed down through generations like a cursed inheritance. Her world was built on a lie so profound it rewrote biology itself. But her response was not to crumble. It was to fight, to investigate, to uncover the truth, no matter how ugly, for the sake of her child. This is a story about the destructive power of secrets, but it's also a powerful testament to a mother's love and the incredible resilience of the human spirit. It reminds us that even when our foundations are shattered, we have the strength to rebuild. If Amelia's story of survival and strength moved you, please show your support. Hit that like button. Share this video with someone you think needs to hear it, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for more true life stories that will stay with you long after they're over. Thank you for listening.